Our next presenter is Siddhartha Ribeiro. He's one of the most important neuroscientists of Brazil.
Can you guys hear me in the back? Yeah? Well, thank you, MAPS, for the invitation. Thank you, Bia, for the vision, for the stamina. The question that arises is, which way should we go? Should we now get the plants and purify all the components and serve them as medicine? Or is the plant still of any use? So the question is, which one is better, the whole plant or the isolated active principle? Most psychiatrists in Brazil, and I'm talking about a very specific cohort here, will say, well, there's no question about this. We know that the purified compounds are much better because you can control the dose. And then they will say, well, the plant is non-scientific, we shouldn't use the plant. And the reason, my motivation here is to question that. Not to go necessarily against it, but to question it. What is the science behind that assumption? See, we need to talk about our hero, Raphael Mechoulam, the guy that first identified the psychoactive properties of THC in '64. You see here that the publications went up and then went down again. In the end of the '80s, the receptor was cloned, the first receptor, the CB1 receptor. There's also the CB2 receptor. So for the first time, we knew what in the body can receive that action, right? And then soon later, the first endogenous cannabinoid was discovered, right? It was named anandamide because ananda is bliss in Sanskrit. Also in the laboratory of Raphael Mechoulam, Israel has been in the forefront of cannabis research for decades now. And you can see that it exploded. I remember going to the Society for Neuroscience meeting that occurs annually in the United States. It has like 20,000, 30,000 scientists together every year. And I remember going as a student, as a PhD student, and I remember the moment in '96 when there were 10 posters about cannabinoids. And now you go there and it's a whole session. It's hundreds, sometimes thousands of researchers just doing that because the CB1 receptor is at the crossroads, a metabolic crossroads of many neurotransmitter systems. It can recruit the G proteins, it can recruit part of the proteins of other receptors. So it's really at the core of what the brain does. So it's not surprising that cannabinoids have so many different applications, right? So there are receptors, CB1 receptors in the brain, and also CB2 receptors throughout the body, and possibly other receptors. We know, still learning a lot about this, right? And the notion is that each of those substances, THC, CBD, CBN, and the many other cannabinoids, will have very specific actions in those receptors. This is the popular notion. This is what usually the psychiatrist will say when he says, well, I have this drug here, this drug is specific for this receptor, and it's going to do something marvelous to you. But in fact, when you look at the affinities of the different ligands, in this case, the endogenous ligands, the endogenous cannabinoids, to the different receptors, we'll see that it's quite promiscuous. It's quite messy. So the medical discourse of specificity is usually false. It's usually not based in real science. Right? So I'm a biologist, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm arguing against the overuse of science for medicine. Medicine should be more upfront about what it doesn't understand or how complex things are. And then Raphael Mechoulam, probably the least suspicious person in the world to talk about this, came up with this concept of entourage effect. In fact, in a paper with Ben Shabbat. And what is this concept? The concept is this, that the plant has over 70 cannabinoids and dozens of terpenes and many other substances that have medical implications, and that when they are together, they can have possibly better effects than when they are separate, right? They can buffer each other's dangerous effects, and they can boost each other's positive effects. This is not a concept that is coming out of the, countercultural movement, political movement. This is a scientific concept proposed by the guy that's pretty much created the whole field. So this should be taken seriously. Again, I'm talking about psychiatry in Brazil, which I know better. People really dismiss this notion as if it was non-scientific, when in fact it's coming from the roots of cannabinoid science. Now, let's give an example of what that means. We know that when people are psychotic, they should not have delta-9 THC. Delta-9 THC is very dangerous for people that have psychosis. However, they can have cannabidiol, CBD, all right. If they smoke pot that is very rich in CBD, some indica strain, they will be fine. This is antipsychotic, and now this is work of Brazilian psychiatrists, the work of Zuardi, the work of Halak, and they're talking about the entourage effect. Because when we're talking about the entourage effect, we're talking about the good thing of having the whole plant, right? How many components are there with medical properties? Well, over 100. You see here different cannabinoids with anti-inflammatory, immunosuppressive, anoretic, bone stimulant, anti-epileptic, and so on. So in fact, the problem for the industry here is that it's a single plant that represents a whole pharmacopoeia. And that's not going to give a lot of money to the industry if the plant is used. Therefore, you need the discourse that the plant is non-scientific. Right? And we're not even mentioning the terpenes, the perfumed components that exist in fruits and exist in marijuana that can actually make it cross the blood barrier. And it can also contain some of the negative effects of THC on working memory. So the terpenes can add on this. So we even know that when Marinol, which is pure synthetic THC, was used to control pain and spasms in multiple sclerosis, it was found in the end that it was much better to have a mix of THC and CBD. That the CBD alone is not so good, so it's better to have the mix. And this shouldn't come as a surprise. Nobody will argue that it's better to take vitamins than eat fruit, right? Nobody will say that oh, it's anti-scientific, you shouldn't be eating this fruit, you should be taking the vitamins as pills. So this is the crazy argument that some psychiatrists are starting to make, and we should be very aware of that. So this is an interesting study, right? This is the relative invasiveness of tumor cells in the medium, in the plate, in the dish. And you see that in the control you have this 100% level. With THC it comes down, with CBD it comes down, but not as much. But when you combine them, it gets even stronger. So this is the entourage effect. This is what it is about. When you combine them, they get stronger. This is another study, also with glioma, with a model of glioma. And this is a combination with radiotherapy as well. So you see here the dose of radiotherapy, and with the untreated, and then with CBD, and then with THC, and the combination much better. And again, for this other cell line, the combination is much better. So it seems like the best thing is do radiotherapy combined with cannabis, with cannabinoids, which come together in the plant. So why would you purify them to then put them together again? That wouldn't make any economical sense.